Hey guys, tonight we're going deep into the ancient world, but we're avoiding the gladiators, the senators, and the emperors. We're going straight for the laundry basket. You are standing on a dusty, narrow street in Ostia, the bustling port of Rome, around 100 AD. The air is thick with the scent of salt, cooking oil, and something else, a sharp, almost ammoniac tang that catches the back of your throat. You look down at your toga, a heavy, white woolen thing draped painstakingly around your body. It is, frankly, filthy. That wine stain from yesterday's cena is now a stubborn purple smudge, and the bottom hem is caked with the fine, reddish dust of the Roman road. This is the reality check. You probably wouldn't survive a day in ancient Rome without being judged entirely on the state of your robes. And yet, keeping them clean was a chemical nightmare. There's no Tide pods, no washing machines, no lovely scent of spring rain. There is only the long, complicated, often pungent road to cleanliness managed by professionals whose methods would make your modern nose wrinkle in confusion and horror. Tonight, we're tracing that path, from the first river rinse to the final, gleaming white fold. It's the history of the Roman laundry service, and it's arguably the most important and least dramatic story of the Republic and Empire. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Life before the fullonica. You trudge along the cobbled street, the heavy wool of your toga chafing slightly. The first stage of laundry, before the professionals took over, was personal, inefficient, and often involved a lot of elbow grease down by the Tiber. Imagine the scene. Early in the morning, long before the sun begins to bake the city, you see small groups of people, mostly slaves or lower, class-free women, gathered at a designated spot along the river Tiber, or perhaps near a public cistern. The water here is certainly not the sparkling, pristine mountain runoff channeled by the mighty aqueducts. That water is reserved for drinking fountains, baths, and private homes. This is the common wash water, already murky, already carrying the detritus of a large, unsanitary city. Your hands, already calloused from a lifetime of small tasks, rub the rough wool against a stone. You're not using soap in the way you know it. True. Solid soap, a mixture of animal fats and wood ash, was certainly known in antiquity. The Gauls, those neighbors to the north, are famous for making a kind of hair pomade out of it. But the Romans generally preferred other methods for textile cleaning. Why waste perfectly good eyes and expensive oils when there are more effective, if less pleasant, natural chemicals available? For a simple daily cleaning, you might just use plain wood ash mixed with water. This process creates lye, a mild alkaline solution that helps to cut grease and loosen dirt. As you work, you notice the other washers are using something a bit more advanced. They have small earthenware jars containing a substance called sapo, which is not exactly soap, but a kind of fuller's earth, a fine clay rich in aluminum silicate. This natural, chalky clay, when mixed with water and rubbed into the fabric, acts as a surprisingly effective degreaser and adsorbent. It literally absorbs the dirt and oil molecules into its fine structure. It's a bit like using dry shampoo on your robe. You work the clay paste into the wool, Scrub fiercely against a ridged stone slab and rinse. The water you use is cold, which helps the wool retain its shape, but does very little for deep stains. You repeat this process, thinking about how this relentless daily grind was inescapable. Keeping yourself clothed and presentable was a constant. Tiring battle against the elements and the general grime of Roman life. It's an interesting, almost meditative experience. The rhythm of the scrubbing, the slow movement of the river. If you were a wealthy Roman, however, this would be beneath you. You wouldn't be down here scrubbing. You would send your clothes, specifically your prized woolen garments, to a fullonica, the specialized laundry establishment. The transition from riverbank to fullonica marks a key point in Roman urban development. It represents the rise of specialized labor and the commodification of a necessary, but smelly, service. Before the specialized laundry shops became ubiquitous, you relied on household slaves who were, frankly, terrible at it. Now, you have an expert. The fullonica became a mainstream historical fact, an essential fixture in every major Roman city, from Pompeii to Londinium. These weren't just washrooms. They were chemical processing plants, often located near public baths to utilize the runoff water, or strategically placed in neighborhoods where the wealthy lived. You might be standing outside the home of a wealthy senator and see a small stream of water trickling down the gutter, carrying the waste of the latrine and the bath. Now, you might scoff at the idea of using bath runoff, but remember Roman sanitation, while advanced for the time, was entirely different from ours. Water was constantly flowing through the city, flushing waste out. The problem was not the water source, but the cleaning agents themselves. Historians still argue whether the fullonica was primarily a cleaning or a finishing shop. Some scholars suggest that the Romans always did their own basic cleaning at home, or by the river, and only sent their clothes to the fullonica for the high-end finishing work, such as bleaching and pressing, the equivalent of today's dry cleaning or specialized stain removal. However, archaeological evidence, especially the large vats and treading areas discovered in places like Pompeii, suggests they were full-service laundromats, handling everything from the initial soak to the final fold. Imagine the first fullonica you step inside. The smell hits you instantly. It's an acrid, sour, faintly metallic smell, utterly unlike the riverside air. It is a mix of stale urine, sulfur, wet wool, and human sweat. The place is a hive of low-level, purposeful activity. You see slaves and free workers, called fullones, the fullers, moving between stone vats of various sizes. The fullones are the unsung heroes of Roman fashion. They were the chemical engineers of their day, dealing with the most stubborn of stains, from olive oil to red dye, all without the aid of modern bleach or synthetic detergents. As you peer into a large, rectangular basin, a wash vat, you see a mixture swirling inside. The fullones are using a curious, fringed tidbit of Roman chemical science here. They sometimes incorporated soda ash, naturally occurring sodium carbonate, or natron, which they mined or collected from dried lake beds in places like Egypt. This natron is a powerful alkali. It essentially saponifies, turns into soap, the greasy residues in the wool right there in the vat. It's harsh on the hands and on the fabric, but it works, especially for linen, which could take a more aggressive washing. You watch as a worker tosses a bundle of dirty tunics into this vat. The garments sink slowly into the murky liquid. The process is not about soaking and scrubbing with brushes, it's about chemistry, heat, and, most importantly, mechanical agitation. The fullonica system arose because a dense, growing urban population, like the million or so people in Rome, simply couldn't rely on river washing alone. The sheer volume of soiled textiles was too great. Furthermore, the Roman toga, the quintessential garment of citizenship, was not easy to clean. It was a single piece of heavy wool that could be 12 to 20 feet long. Trying to keep that thing pristinely white, the color that signified status and purity, was a monumental undertaking, an ongoing service that demanded professional expertise. It was the only way to maintain the status symbol of a sparkling white toga, a candida, worn by candidates for public office. You certainly wouldn't want to show up to the forum looking less than luminous, because in Rome, you were literally what you wore. Think of the fullonica as the first industrial, scale dry cleaner, built solely to protect the delicate dignity of the Roman elite's wardrobe. It's a surprisingly sophisticated solution to a very simple problem. How do you get mud out of wool? The answer, as you're about to discover, is very, very strange. The very structure of the fullonica signals its professional intent. You move past the initial soaking vats and into a central courtyard, often open to the air to allow for drying. In the corner, you see a furnace, evidence that water could be heated or that clothes could be treated with warm air. The scale of the operation is what's truly mesmerizing. A dozen people moving silently, efficiently, each performing a small, specialized task that contributes to the final dazzling white of the finished product. No wasted effort, no idle conversation, just the steady, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the work being done. This specialized labor freed up the average Roman from a truly tedious chore. You might grumble about the cost of the service, but it was worth the money to preserve the life of an expensive woolen garment. Wool, unlike linen, requires careful treatment. Aggressive scrubbing or too much heat can cause the fibers to felt, shrinking and hardening the fabric. The fullones, through generations of practice, knew how to clean wool without destroying it, a skill that required a deep, though empirical, understanding of chemistry. We're about to step into the most peculiar room of the entire establishment, the place where the true magic and the worst smell originates. But for now, you rest your eyes on the dull, off-white tunics soaking in the natron vats and wonder how these grimy things will ever become brilliant white. The answer, as always in Rome, is both ingenious and deeply peculiar. The rise of the fullones. You move deeper into the fullonica, the low ceiling echoing with the sloshing sound of water and the rhythmic slap of bare feet. This is where the magic really happens, and it is a job done by the fullones, the professional fullers. Their job was not just washing. It was a form of industrial, scale chemical cleaning and fabric finishing, a trade so essential that it sometimes rivaled baking in importance. The fullones weren't just low-wage laborers. They were skilled craftspeople who understood the complex relationship between wool fibers, water temperature, and various natural alkalis. Look over there, in the center of the largest room. You see a series of small, sunken basins, or perhaps a single large stone tank divided by low walls. This is the saltus e fullonicus, or the fuller's trading area. And this is where the fullones earned their keep, the dirtiest items, especially those heavy woolen togas, are placed into this tank along with water, follows earth, that powerful adsorbent clay we mentioned, and a special, potent cleaning agent. The fullers step into the vats. They wear nothing on their feet. No calci, no sandals, because they need the direct, tactile connection with the cloth. Their work is a unique, back-breaking, and frankly, mildly humorous dance. They are treading the cloth. Imagine them stepping, stomping, and rhythmically beating the cloth with their feet. A constant, low-impact pressure that works the cleaning agents deep into the wool's fibers. This mechanical action is crucial. It's the Roman version of a washing machine's agitator cycle. The steady squish, squish, squish of their feet in the murky liquid provides the required friction to lift the dirt out, but without the harsh rubbing that would damage the expensive wool. You can almost feel the fatigue in their legs. They work in tandem, sometimes 2 or 3 men in one basin, moving in an almost synchronized fashion. It's hard to imagine anyone relaxing while listening to the sounds of this labor. Yet the rhythmic slosh has a mesmerizing quality to it, a steady sound of work being performed. This treading process is a mainstream historical fact, vividly depicted in surviving wall paintings in Pompeii, which show the fullones up to their knees in the wash. One can't help but chuckle slightly at the sheer physical commitment. It's the ancient equivalent of having to do a rigorous cardio workout just to get your shirt clean. If one of them tripped, the fullonica would likely echo with a good-natured, if slightly strained, groan. The entire process is fueled by a peculiar chemical agent. The key to the deep, grease-cutting power of the fuller's wash is an alkali stronger than lye or soda ash. This is where the urine comes in. Ah, yes, the urine. This is the surprisingly gross and yet fascinating secret to Roman laundering. Stale urine, known to the Romans as lotium, is rich in ammonia, ammonium carbonate, a natural compound formed as urea decomposes. Ammonia is a highly effective cleaning agent. It's a powerful degreaser that works wonders on animal fats, oils, and the lanolin found in wool. When you wash wool, you need something that can break down those oils without dissolving the wool fiber itself. Ammonia does the trick. You watch as a worker carefully scoops a quantity of this yellowish liquid into the treading vat. It's not fresh, it's collected and allowed to mature, which concentrates the ammonia. Imagine the smell wafting up as the fullones stump, a potent mix of wet wool, human sweat, and concentrated ammonia. You probably wouldn't last 5 minutes in this room without excusing yourself for some fresh air. The fullones themselves, of course, were accustomed to it. It was simply the smell of their highly skilled trade. The urine collection itself reveals a quirky or fringe tidbit of Roman life. It was often a publicly managed process, since every person in Rome produced this essential cleaning agent. The city established collection points. These weren't just private affairs. Sometimes large earthenware jars, known as dolia or amphorae, were placed on street corners for public use. Yes, the Romans basically had public pee, pots strategically located throughout the city. A small army of collectors would patrol the streets, emptying these jars and bringing the lotium back to the fullonica. In a strange twist of irony, the very same ammonia that made their clothes brilliantly white was a source of great social debate. Emperor Vespasian, who reigned in the late 1st century AD, seeing the lucrative nature of this essential commodity, reportedly instituted a tax on the public collection and sale of urine. When his son, Titus, complained about the vulgarity of taxing a waste product, Vespasian allegedly held up a gold coin earned from the tax and said, "Pecunia non olet." Money doesn't stink. This famous phrase, a mainstream historical fact, perfectly encapsulates the Roman attitude toward the fullones. Their work was vital and profitable, but intrinsically linked to something disgusting. Despite their essential trade, the fullones often occupied a low rung on the social ladder. They dealt with filth, they smelled constantly of their work, and their product, urine, was considered vile. Historians still argue whether the Vespasian tax was levied directly on the fullonica for their use of the product, or on the transporters who collected it. Regardless of the exact tax target, the industry generated significant revenue, proving that even the most boring history can be surprisingly lucrative. As the fullones continue their rhythmic treading, you notice something else in the mixture. The fuller's earth is doing more than just lifting grease. It's also acting as a natural whitening agent. The fine, almost invisible clay particles help to scar and polish the wool fibers, leaving them smoother and therefore brighter. The better the fullones were at this initial wash, the less they would have to rely on the next. Even riskier chemical process, the bleaching. The work is repetitive, yes, but it requires stamina and precision. Too much treading, and the wool felts; too little, and the dirt remains. The head fullo, the magister fullonum, acts as the quality control, inspecting the water and the texture of the cloth throughout the process. He knows by feel alone when the garment is sufficiently agitated. This is not guesswork. It's an ancestral trade secret, passed down from master to apprentice, often within the same family. A thought pops into your head. If the Romans knew about solid soap from the Gauls, why didn't they adopt it universally? The gentle humor of the situation is that they could have. But the materials required for good soap, large amounts of expensive, high-quality olive oil and potash, were considered too valuable for washing clothes. Olive oil was for food, perfume, and bathing themselves. Urine was just waste. The economic logic of using a readily available, free, and highly effective byproduct was simply too compelling to ignore. Why buy the cow when you can get the milk, the cream, and the ammonia for free? It's a beautifully efficient, if slightly nauseating, example of ancient resource management. The heavy, dirt-laden water is now carefully drained from the treading vats. The fullones guide the water into a sewer or drainage ditch, perhaps utilizing some of the fullonica's own built, in settling tanks to recapture some of the fuller's earth for reuse. The garments are now clean, in a chemical sense, but they are dull, heavy with water, and absolutely reeking of ammonia. They are ready for the next critical step, the rinse, and the terrifying transformation to brilliant white. You take a slow, deep breath, trying to clear the lingering ammonia smell from your nostrils, and prepare to follow the garment out into the courtyard. The secret science of urine. You followed the water, heavy garments out of the damp treading room, and into the sunshine of the fullonica courtyard. But the lingering smell is still potent, a sharp, acrid reminder of the industry's main chemical engine. Now, we confront the truly peculiar science of the lotium, or stale urine, which sits at the very heart of the Roman laundry process. Think of ammonia, text NH3. In your world, it's a powerful, clear, slightly dangerous substance you buy in a bottle for cleaning stubborn grime. In the Roman world, it was freely available, endlessly replenished, and naturally synthesized. The key to its power, as you recall, lies in the breakdown of urea, the major nitrogenous waste product in mammalian urine. When urine is left to stand, bacteria act upon the urea, converting it into ammonium carbonate, which is the chemical precursor to ammonia. This decomposition process, which gives the stored urine its famously pungent odor, is exactly what the fullers needed. They didn't just want fresh urine, they wanted stale, fermented urine, which was the concentrated essence of their cleaning power. This reliance on a human waste product reveals a startling efficiency in Roman resource management. It was the ultimate form of recycling. Every citizen, from the highest senator to the lowliest slave, was unwittingly contributing to the national cleaning effort. And to manage this essential commodity, the collection system was elaborate. You look out onto the street, just beyond the fullonica's entrance, and picture the scene: large, bell-shaped clay jars, or dolia, a familiaria, standing ready on street corners. These were the public collection points. Imagine strolling through the forum in the middle of the day, pausing for a moment to use a terracotta jar for a very public function. It's a quirky tidbit of daily life that demonstrates how deeply practical and how little concerned with modern notions of privacy the Romans were. This system, which ensured a steady and reliable flow of lotium to the fullers, was arguably the first city-wide chemical supply chain based entirely on human biology. The fullones would send out small gangs, often slaves or apprentices, to patrol these public jars, emptying them into even larger barrels and transporting them back to the shop. Once returned, the liquid was often poured into large, sealed storage vats to continue the crucial fermentation process. You must remember that this wasn't just any liquid, it was the active ingredient. The older and more concentrated the ammonia, the better it was at degreasing and cutting through the heavy oils and animal fats that inevitably soiled woolen clothes. The process of soaking and trading in this ammonia-rich solution was not without risk. For the fabrics, the concentrated alkali was harsh, requiring careful rinsing. For the workers, the fumes would have been intense. You can almost feel the burning sensation in your lungs from the sheer volatility of the ammonia gas rising from the vats. The fullers likely suffered from chronic respiratory issues and eye irritation, a professional hazard of being ancient Rome's most essential chemical handlers. This brings us back to the surprising social stigma attached to the fullones, despite their vital role. Their trade was listed among the disreputable or vile occupations, alongside leather tanners and undertakers, professions that dealt with filth and death. They were often marginalized, required to live in specific districts due to the smell, and certainly not invited to the best dinner parties. Yet, their economic standing was often surprisingly high. A master fullo could own a considerable amount of property and slaves. His business provided an essential service that touched the lives of every class, from the poorest farmer to the wealthiest senator. The humor in this situation is multi-layered. The people who made the upper class look pristine were considered inherently dirty. It's an oddly pleasing irony. Imagine a wealthy Roman patron, dressed in his perfectly bleached white toga, a candida, delicately holding his nose as he passes the very shop that made his purity possible. It's a magnificent, gently sarcastic commentary on Roman class consciousness. We circle back to the Vespasian tax, that mainstream historical fact about Pecunia non olet, the fact that an emperor found the urine trade profitable enough to tax shows its scale. It wasn't a minor cottage industry. It was a major utility, managed, taxed, and depended upon. Historians still argue whether the tax applied to the individual collection jars, making it an indirect tax on the poured, or to the final sale of the cleaned clothes, thus making it a business tax. Either way, it highlights the economic centrality of this pungent product. Now, let's look at the garments themselves. They've been through the treading process and are now resting momentarily. They are free of grease and ground, in dirt, but they are far from the dazzling white required for a ceremonial toga. They've gone from gray to a yellowish off-white, and the smell, while less intense than inside the treading room, still clings to the fibers. To address the color, the fullones had two final, specialized steps: bleaching and finishing. The Roman textile industry understood that simply cleaning was not enough. The cloth had to be visually perfected. For the common man, the post-ammonia rinse was probably sufficient. But for the elite, for the wedding togas and the robes of office, the cloth had to be blinding. It had to radiate purity. This leads us to the next chamber, where the freshly washed wool will undergo a transformation from merely clean to truly magnificent. You observe the workers preparing to move the heavy, wet bundles. They are surprisingly gentle with the fabric at this stage. Years of experience have taught them that the wool, stressed by the alkali wash and the mechanical treating, is now vulnerable. It's a careful, almost tender handling, a contrast to the brutal treading just moments ago. The fullones were also keenly aware of the types of fabric they were handling. Linen, the fabric of the common tunic, was more robust and could handle a harsher chemical attack. Wool, which was heavier, warmer, and more costly, required greater finesse. This specialized knowledge elevated the fullones above mere laborers. They were textile professionals. They knew, for example, that the quality of the fuller's earth used also mattered. Some quarries produced clay with better scoring properties than others. It's a surprisingly deep, empirical science hidden beneath the stinky facade of the laundry business. The Roman world was full of these small, unheralded experts who kept the daily machinery of the empire running smoothly, from the fullones to the bakers and the water engineers. Now, let's follow the toga into the heat. Beyond the soap, bleaching, and pressing, the garment you've been tracking, now technically clean, but still somewhat dull and smelling distinctly of a petting zoo, is ready for its transformation. The meticulous art of finishing. This stage is what truly elevates the work of the fullones and justifies the price they charged the elite. It's where the off-white wool becomes the dazzling toga, a candida, the radiant white of social standing and political ambition. You observe the fullers moving the damp bundles to a specialized area, often a small, enclosed booth connected to a furnace or a central heat source. This is the sulfur smoking chamber, the Roman equivalent of a chemical bleaching unit. The process is deceptively simple and, again, relies on clever, if slightly dangerous, empirical chemistry. The garment is carefully hung on a wicker frame, suspended over a small brazier. The worker then tosses a handful of sulfur onto the hot coals. As the sulfur burns, it releases sulfur dioxide gas. You remember the acrid smell from the urine. But this is different, a sharp, choking odor that makes you involuntarily hold your breath. Sulfur dioxide is a powerful reducing agent, a compound that removes color by chemically altering the structure of the chromophores, the color-producing parts in the fabric dyes. In essence, it temporarily strips the yellow or gray tint from the wool fibers, making them appear brilliant white. This is a quirky or fringe tidbit that perfectly encapsulates Roman ingenuity, using the byproduct of a readily available mineral to achieve a cosmetic effect. The risk, of course, was significant. Sulfur dioxide, when mixed with moisture, and the garments are certainly damp, forms sulfurous acid, which is corrosive. Too much exposure, and the expensive wool garment would disintegrate. This required the specialized skill of the fullo to judge the exact timing. A few minutes in the chamber was enough to bleach, but any longer meant ruin. The fullers likely had tricks, perhaps dampening the floor or controlling the temperature, to ensure the bleaching was effective but non-destructive. As you step away from the pungent fumes, you follow the garment to the final stages of the process, which are about presentation. After the bleaching, the wool needs its softness and shape restored. The Romans didn't have fabric softeners, but they had human touch and mechanical ingenuity. The now dazzling white cloth is thoroughly rinsed again, this time in clean water, perhaps even the pure water from the aqueduct designated for washing, to remove all traces of acid and, mercifully, most of the ammonia smell. Next comes the napping and carding process. You watch a worker take a metal brush or a specialized tool fitted with teasels. The dried, spiky heads of the fuller's thistle plant, and gently comb the surface of the wool. This action raises the fine, soft fibers of the wool, creating a smooth, velvety finish or nap. This restores the garment's luxurious feel, which would have been flattened and hardened by the treading and chemical treatment. It's a painstaking, manual process, another testament to the attention to detail. This specific use of the teasel plant is a mainstream historical fact, essential to the textile finishing process across the Roman world and beyond. The resulting smoothness made the light reflect off the fabric more evenly, enhancing the white brightness achieved by the sulfur smoking. Finally, the garment must be pressed and folded. A toga is a massive, complex piece of cloth that requires precise draping. A poorly pressed toga was the ultimate sartorial embarrassment. The pressing wasn't done with a modern steam iron. It was achieved through a large wooden or stone screw press called a torcula. The freshly cleaned and napped cloth was folded carefully, often with guide marks or patterns, and placed between two heavy wooden boards. The screw was slowly turned, applying immense, uniform pressure to smooth out every crease and set the folds. You can almost hear the soft creaking of the wooden press, a gentle, rhythmic sound that contrasts with the earlier noisy stomping. The fullones weren't just removing dirt, they were resetting the fabric's memory. When the toga was removed, it retained sharp, clean folds, ready for the customer to drape it over himself in the complex, status-affirming manner required by Roman etiquette. The quality of the folding was often advertised as a mark of the shop's prestige. This meticulous finishing work leads to an interesting point of scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the fullones also handled the full range of dyeing services, or if dyeing was a completely separate industry managed by the tinctoria. While fullonica certainly removed color, the bleaching, they may have also applied subtle tints to keep colors vibrant, especially the popular Tyrian purple used by senators, which required specialized skills. It is likely that in smaller towns, the fullo did it all, while large cities like Rome supported the highly specialized tinctor guilds. You stand by the folding bench, watching the last folds being set. The finished toga is heavy, impeccably white, and smooth to the touch, ready to be returned to its owner. The full cost of this entire, month-long service, from collection to delivery, was significant, representing a necessary expenditure for any Roman citizen who wanted to maintain their social image. It's a marvelous, slightly unbelievable journey from a pot of public urine to a gleaming, status symbol garment. The entire history of the Roman laundry service is a quiet testament to the economic power of cleanliness and the surprising chemical ingenuity of an empire that managed to keep millions of wool clothes sparkling without a single washing machine. You realize now that the low-level, continuous hum of the ancient world was not just the noise of carts and chatter, but the relentless, rhythmic labor of people like the fullones, forever stomping and smoothing the fabric of Roman society. Laundry's social status and fall. You step out of the humid, chemically charged atmosphere of the fullonica and back into the vibrant, noisy Roman street. You now see the laundry business not just as a chore, but as a sophisticated, essential pillar of the Roman economy and social structure. The service you just observed, the entire, undramatic history of that single toga, was underpinned by a complex commercial hierarchy, extending from the wealthiest patrons to the lowliest collectors of lotium. The ownership structure of the fullonica was often a blend of aspiration and wealth, while the actual labor was performed by slaves or low-status freedmen. The shop itself might be owned by a wealthy patron, who saw it as a lucrative, if slightly vulgar, source of income. This patron would supply the initial capital, the land, the stone vats, the pressing equipment, and then lease or hire a highly skilled magister fullonum as master fullard, to manage the technical operations. This manager, often a freedman who had earned his expertise, held the truly valuable knowledge, the secret timing for the sulfur bleach, the proper blend of fuller's earth, and the precise rhythm for the foot-treading dance you witnessed. The existence of powerful, organized guilds or collegia dedicated to the fullers is a mainstream historical fact, demonstrating their collective economic clout. These guilds looked out for the interests of their members, negotiated contracts, and likely helped maintain quality standards, ensuring that a wealthy client's toga wasn't ruined by an amateur's heavy hand. These guilds also acted as important social and political clubs, granting the fullones a collective voice they lacked as individuals. You might see an apprentice, a young boy called a tyronarius, carrying a bundle of pristine white wool. He is running a delivery service, a small but critical part of the transaction. This highlights a quirky or fringe tidbit about the ancient Roman workplace. The laundry business was often a family affair. Sons learned from fathers, and the wife of the master fullo, the fullonissa, often played a crucial role, perhaps managing the delicate finishing work or keeping the accounts. Roman society wasn't always strictly divided by gender in the workplace, especially in trades that involved textiles and domesticity. The fullonica were often bustling, multi-generational enterprises. Now, let's consider the clothes that didn't go to the fullonica. Most common people, slaves, soldiers, and the urban poor, wore simple woolen or linen tunics that were easily managed by the basic lye and ash method at home or by the river. The fullonica was largely reserved for the elaborate, expensive outer garments of the elite, particularly the bulky, white woolen toga. This distinction highlights the service's role not just in cleaning, but in preserving status. The Roman social fabric was literally reflected in the quality and whiteness of the clothing. The financial transaction was simple but robust. The client would pay a fee based on the garment's size and complexity. A heavily stained or intricately folded toga cost more than a simple tunic. The master fullo would use that money to pay his specialized workers, purchase fuller's earth, buy sulfur, and perhaps even pay the infamous Vespasian tax on the lotium. Though, as you remember, historians still argue whether the tax was on the collection or the business's final product. Regardless, the economic cycle was complete. Human waste was converted into cleaning power, which was converted into social status, which was then converted into tax revenue. The system was ingenious, but it was also fragile. The complex infrastructure of the fullonica, the specialized vats, the dependence on city-wide waste collection, the guilds, and the patronage, was deeply interwoven with the stability of the empire. As the Roman world began its long, gradual decline in the West, that infrastructure began to crumble. As imperial authority waned and cities shrank, the elaborate public works that sustained the laundry business were neglected. The great aqueducts that supplied fresh water for the final rinses fell into disrepair. The efficient street, corner collection of lotium ceased to be a guaranteed supply chain. As trade routes broke down, the supply of high-quality imported fuller's earth and specialized sulfur became irregular and expensive. The resulting shift was a return to simpler methods. People reverted to washing primarily with river water, lye, and simple home-made soaps. The adoption of true soap, previously too costly, became more widespread as the fullonica infrastructure failed. The demand for the brilliantly white, high-status toga also diminished as the complexity of the Roman social structure simplified in the early medieval period. Why pay for a laborious, chemical cleaning process when a simple, practical tunic was all that was needed for survival? The fullonica became a relic, a fascinating piece of Roman ingenuity that couldn't survive the collapse of the logistical and urban framework that had supported it for centuries. The stone vats were abandoned, sometimes repurposed for other uses, like storage or waste pits. The skilled trade of the fullo either vanished or was absorbed back into basic, generalized domestic tasks. The elegant solution to the problem of a dirty toga simply faded away. The end of the Roman laundry service isn't a dramatic battle or a sudden catastrophe. It's a slow, quiet decay. It is the story of a system that became too refined, too reliant on urban density and institutional support to survive the chaos that followed. It's the gentle humor of a world where the ability to clean a wool garment perfectly was a mark of civilization, and where the loss of that ability marked a slow descent into a less chemically sophisticated age. As you watch the sun set over the remains of the old city, The faint, phantom smell of ammonia is finally gone, replaced by the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. The light is fading now, and our journey through the entire, undramatic history of the Roman laundry service is coming to a quiet close. You can let go of the smells, the pungent ammonia, the sharp sulfur, the wet wool. Allow the rhythmic stomping of the fullones to soften in your mind, becoming nothing more than a gentle, distant beat, the image of the heavy, smooth, dazzling white toga, once a symbol of status so crucial it required an entire chemical industry, powered by human waste to maintain, is fading now, too. That world so preoccupied with the surface sheen of its citizens' robes is long, long gone. Your body is heavy, and you can feel the warmth of your own bed, your own soft sheets. There are no treading vats here, only quiet. No need to worry about the logistics of ancient chemicals or the quality of the fold. Just the simple, comforting presence of the dark and the soft sounds of your own breathing. Let the last threads of Roman history drift away, like the gentle smoke from a long-extinguished sulfur brazier. There is only rest now. Settle in. Everything is quiet. Just sleep.